Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and this is episode 491. I'm joined to discuss the Knicks' loss in Game 5 to the Detroit Pistons by my co-host, Stacy, that is at StacyPan89 on Twitter. Stacy, I would ask you how your game tonight.
Yeah, I'm sure you can't relate, but it's not fun. It's not fun being in group chats with people that suddenly got into Detroit Pistons basketball, who are like, "Why does Jalen Brunson?" I got a text. Jalen Brunson had 1-and-1 on a turnaround after today in the fourth, and someone texted me saying Jalen Brunson's a bitch. Not a person I text with very often, and I was just like, "This is very annoying. It's not fun."
Yeah, I've had my friend who's a Pistons fan, one of my good friends who literally doesn't care about basketball, basically only cares about the NBA at this time of the year, suddenly decide that he needs to message me constantly throughout games, and I'm like, I am muting you because I don't want to talk to you right now. But we're not here to talk about our personal battles with friends. We're here to talk about the Knicks. We're going to do that. Before we do that, I do make a few announcements. First being that Strickland has a YouTube channel where you may be watching this podcast. If you are, and you have not done so already, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment. That'd be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise, which you can find on our website at www.strick.land. There's a link to take you to the merchandise store. There's all kinds of cool stuff on there, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we've got it. Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Strickland's podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to Takes from Obvious Bows as a podcast hosted by Andrew Steele, a.k.a. Doug, along with Zach Blatter, and you get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. I think $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod, where I rant around with that even more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Murray, one of the best in business, and you get access to Strictly NFL, which you guessed is a podcast about the NFL that is hosted by Konstantin Metrikos and Desmond Novak. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier. It's going to a variety of additional benefits, like listening on pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours. Truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not, knows to be possible without you. And so, without further ado, let's get started. So, full transparency, I had a playoff game for my soccer league. So, I did not watch the first half of this game. We won our game. It was the third place game. We won in heroic fashion. We had no subs, but we battled through and pulled off a rear guard action and won 7-3, actually. Convincing victory. Nobody cares about that. But I did watch the second half of this game. And I mean, it could have been the second half of any game in this series. Tight game to close the first half. I think every single game has been pretty tight at the half, if I remember correctly. I think game 1 was a 2-point game. I believe game 2, the Knicks had a slight advantage. Maybe they were slightly down. I don't know. Every game has basically been more or less somewhat tight to start the second half. And then they come out in the second half, and the Pistons immediately are able to go on some type of extended run, 8-0, 10-2, 14-4, whatever the fuck it is. They go on some type of extended run, and we see the lead balloon and balloon and balloon. And then finally, at some point, Thibs makes a sub, usually around the 7-minute mark, the 5-minute mark, I should say, of the third quarter. And then the Knicks are able to slice into the deficit. And then the rest of the game is them kind of trying to figure out a way to whittle down the lead, get ahead, maintain a lead, whatever. And either they succeed or they don't. And I guess to some people, we watch this, and people can disagree on this. And for some people, the idea is, well, the players are not executing better. Guys need to make shots. And if they don't make the shots, then really what else can the coach do? And for me, I watch these games and I'm like, why is it that every single possession starts with 14 seconds on the shot clock? Why is it that every possession that's not a transition opportunity off of, a rebound or, off of a turnover is a total slog, and it all involves Jalen Brunson having to initiate. And why is it that we are not spamming Cat and Brunson pick and rolls? Because I'm at a point where, like, I don't personally believe the reasoning of, well, they're defending Josh Hart with the center, and so, really, what are you like? I think that's a cop out. I don't think that's a reasonable excuse anymore, and I don't think it's an excuse anymore because we've seen it play out for over 4 months now, where we're just not. We've reduced this number of pick and rolls that Cat is running with Brunson or whoever it may be. I'm sick of watching plays at the end of the game. We have a timeout. I think it was 97-95, might have been 95-95. I forget. Apologies for that. We come out of the timeout. There is no Brunson or Hart on the floor because they were both dealing with some type of, injury. I don't know what happened with them. Brunson seemed to have tweaked his ankle again. I don't know exactly what happened with Hart. It almost looked like he got hit in the nuts, but then he went back to the locker room, so maybe it was like an abdomen thing. I don't know what happened with him. He finished the game, though.
Some breast milk.
Yeah, probably what it was. I'm sick of watching this. These guys are waiting there at the fucking scorer's table with 1:57 left. Whatever, that's a separate thing. We're going to get to that. But the play out of the timeout, neither guy's on the floor. It's literally just, it is just a Cat has the ball at the top of the key. It's basically 1-4 flat for Cat, which I don't know. Like, I don't understand how that is the play call out of a timeout.
They got a decent look for campaign afterwards, right? That's a floater usually hits. But I do think, like, there's a reason why campaign isn't usually in the game in those moments, right?
This is the point.
And you see them when you're a Knicks fan and you see I'll let you finish.
Yeah.
When you see those guys at the scorer's table, they keep panning to them. And it's 2 minutes, 1:30, 1 minute, 30 seconds. Why are you not? And I think that the excuse given after the explanation given at the end of the game by Thibs was, well, we wanted to be mindful of the timeout situation. We still ended up in a position where we needed to advance the ball and we couldn't late, right? That's why Deuce got fouled, aside from him being in the game at all, which I do think was also a mistake. But yeah, it lost 1 minute and 30 seconds, I believe, of game time with them off the floor where they could have been on when you need them on the most. Both of them, especially Brunson, obviously.
And this is where I just don't understand it. It's 99-95. All right, that's the shot. That's the possession you're talking about where Campaign gets a good look at a floater and he back rims it. Whatever. I don't have a problem with that possession. I don't have a problem with that shot. But it's 99-95. I think at that point there are about 2 minutes left, something like that. That is when you call a timeout, right? That's when you call a timeout. Okay, 99-95, they just, whatever. Like, let's get the guys back in. Let's get Brunson back in. Let's get Josh Hart in. Let's close this out. And let's put our back. And the timeout thing is bullshit. It is an excuse. It is bullshit. I don't care what he says.
It didn't play out that way.
We're
still in the same position, right?
Why the fuck are you valuing timeouts down 4 instead of valuing putting in the fucking guys that you believe are best suited to winning the fucking game? Like, that is fucking asinine. I'm sorry. And then to the point you're making, these guys are sitting at the fucking scorer's table for 90 seconds of actual fucking game time before you make the fucking call to do it. Like, it is so unconscionable that happened. That is him totally losing. He does this. This is just a thing with Thibs. He gets so into the game. Like, I really believe it. I think he gets so into the game that he forgets about these, like, things that are also relevant, that are kind of like off to the periphery of what is actually happening on the floor. We saw this most fucking clearly at the end of game 5 last fucking year against the Sixers. We saw this exact same, not the exact same situation, obviously a different situation, but an exact same type of thing where he just totally mentally freezes. It's like, oh, like, why the fuck is Mitchell Robinson in a drop against Tyrese Maxey? Why the fuck are you not switching everything? Why are you not there's countless things that we could go through from that sequence, which was all of 1 minute. Knicks are up 6 in that game with a minute left, or where the fuck it was, under a minute left, I think, and somehow contrived to fucking blow the lead and have to go to overtime, lose the fucking game, and then have to play a game 6 in Philly, which costs us rest. And we knew with the fucking team we had last year, with how much they were, really maxing out and, playing the minutes they could and going so hard and blah, blah, how important rest was. We pissed that away. You pissed away a game today that you could have won. And yeah, you want to sit there and tell me, well, guys got to make free throws. Yeah, you know what? They got to make free throws. Brunson goes 7 of 10. That's an off night. But if he hits one more like that, then we're okay with that. Like 4 of the missed free throws are Mitchell Robinson, which, you just kind of have to accept. Like you're kind of expecting that, right? Like, if he makes 5 of 7, you're like, holy shit, what a fucking performance for Mitch. He misses 4 of them. Fucking Deuce misses 2 at the end, which I don't know how truly relevant they were.
Well, he missed one. He missed the second one ostensibly on purpose.
Right, because he's going to have to miss the second one anyway, right? Like the second one's going to have to be missed no matter what. So, if you want to say, like, if you want to,
but why was Deuce in the game and getting the ball is also a question.
I mean, I don't mind. I know he has not shot the ball well. I think
it's not even. But you're inbounding it to him, where the whole thing is you know they're going to foul you, right? Because they're not.
Well, I think Deuce is a
so good. So then you want somebody who can make that decision quickly, or you give it to Brunson and say he'll figure something out, or if he gets fouled, he can handle making the first free throw and missing the second. I do think, like, why does Deuce get the ball? Like, why is Deuce in the game? Give it to Hart and then make a quick pass up, right? Or I
don't mind Deuce in the game. I think it's okay. I think it's reasonable in that situation to want a guy who is ostensibly one of your better free throw shooters.
But you're inbounding it to him.
I understand that. My point is, I have to watch the playback a few times and really decide, like, okay, was the play actually for Deuce, or was it Deuce was like?
So Deuce, but if Deuce has to make a read, that's worse because that's the one thing.
Right, but you
have him off ball and you have him at the 3-point line, and it's like, okay, he's an option. That's right, fine. He can shoot.
I think it's okay in that situation to kind of be like, okay, look, I'm gonna have my best free throw shooters on the floor because we know if in the likelihood they get fouled, which is pretty decent because we knew what Detroit was going to do there. In the likelihood they get fouled, I want my best free throw shooters there, so I know that I've maximized my opportunity to make that first free throw, and then the second one, no matter who is at the line, right, you're going to be trying to miss it in that situation. So, like,
but if that's what you're playing for, that's what my issue is, right?
I think
you had 5 seconds. If you can run a play to get it 3-point.
I don't think he's playing for that. I think it's reasonable to weigh all these things, and also, like, yeah, I know Deuce has shot poorly from 3 so far in this series, but like, he's generally been a good 3-point shooter for the last couple of years.
Yeah, my issue is having him get the inbound pass. I guess that if they key in on Brunson, that's fine. Then put it in the hands of someone who can make a decision.
Again, like I said, I'm not going to kill him for that because I haven't watched the playback enough to feel very strongly about, was the play actually for Deuce to get the ball, or, was Deuce supposed to get the ball and somebody was supposed to do something else and he's supposed to dump it off to them quickly. I have to watch it back. I was very pissed at the time that I watched it, so I did not have the clearest read on it. So I'm not going to kill Thibs for that because I actually am okay with having Deuce in the game there, is basically my fundamental point. But there's so much bullshit in this game. And then forgetting, like, people, this is what drives me nuts. It's like, well, you asked for Deuce to play all these minutes. Like, okay, one, I've asked for Deuce to play more for 2 reasons. One, the Knicks were great in his minutes in the regular season. Also, they won his minutes again tonight, even though he's played like crap. I think he's actually a net positive in this series, even though he's shot poorly.
Bad though on both. Like, he keeps jumping at fakes. The eye test. This is not quickly again where you're seeing him make insane off-ball reads. It's been.
Yeah, I don't agree. He had a great block on Cade today. He came with a couple of big rebounds. Like, I just disagree with this idea that he's coming out there and it's a fucking disaster every time he's out there. And it's
not Shamit, but he hasn't been good.
Hold on, that's the point. Like, if he was actually this fucking disaster that everybody's making him out to be, you don't win minutes in the playoffs with some guy out there crapping his pants. We know this because we used to watch Landry Shamit in the playoffs this year, where we're like, oh wow, so that's what it looks like when a guy's literally shitting himself and is incapable of doing anything effectively.
I think he's benefited from lineup luck, is what I'm saying. Like, I don't
know. Look, maybe he's benefited from lineup luck. All I know
this isn't a Quickly situation to me. I actually legitimately think Quickly was good in those playoffs and just missed shots. I think Deuce makes a lot.
Okay, whatever, Stacy. I don't give a shit about this. We don't need to talk about the fucking specifics of Deuce McBride's fucking minutes. That's not the fucking point. You feel like, okay, so one, the point in the regular season is Deuce McBride in these lineups. Okay, great. Like they seem to be really good. We also know the regular season isn't the playoffs. So in the regular season, I think it's okay to try those things more often, especially in games where at the end of them, you're like, wow, it looks like Josh Hart is not being defended. And for some reason, we also have Josh Hart just spotted up in the corner the whole fucking time. Spotted up above, above the break, spotted up on the wing, but just doing nothing, just spotted up out there, even though his man's not defending him. Yeah, in those situations, I would like to see Deuce McBride in. And I'd still like to see him in those situations right now, even though he can't make a fucking three. Because I think they defend him differently. They do not defend him like a total non-shooter. You can't tell me that. You can't tell me they do. You can just watch the fucking games. Like, they are not defending him the same way they defend Josh Hart. So it is not that, and that, to be very clear, I actually will give Thibs a bunch of credit for doing exactly what the actual core of the argument is. The core of the argument was not play Deuce McBride more all the fucking time and never play Josh Hart. No, the core of the argument is if something isn't working in the game, try a different thing. If one guy is playing good and another guy is playing poorly, you can go with the guy who's playing good. Josh Hart has played very well in this series. Now, that does not mean that the problems that we know exist when Josh Hart is on the floor regarding how teams defend him they've disappeared and they no longer matter. No, but he's playing well, and Deuce has not played well, definitely not offensively enough to warrant making that change. So in that situation, this is the exact point. So Thibs has made the call of like, and we knew he was going to make the call because he's always going to make the call for Josh Hart anyway. But in this instance where Deuce is playing poorly, you have to give Thibs credit for that because that's the right fucking call. So I have no problem with that. My problem is we have seen it the other way around where Josh Hart is having a bad game and Deuce is having a good game, or Deuce can at least go in and get defended at the fucking 3-point line. And we'd maybe see what it looks like to have a 5-out offense with Karl fucking Anthony Towns at the 5 for once. We might get the chance to see that, but that doesn't happen. That's the argument. And that argument isn't just about Deuce McBride this season or Josh Hart this season or this team this year. It is a fucking thing we have seen repeatedly over 5 years on Tom Thibodeau as the coach. He's done a good job. Anybody that tells you Tom Thibodeau hasn't done a good job is a fucking liar. They're lying. They're full of shit. He's clearly done a good job with the New York Knicks over 5 years. He will, at the end of the season, whenever the fuck it ends, whenever it ends, you would look at the totality of what he's done in 5 years, and you would have to say he has emerged from that with credit, and the Knicks are a better franchise today than they were when Tom Thibodeau took the job. But that is not what this is about anymore. This is no longer about, hey, we need to establish a foothold. We need to create a foundation. We need to create a culture, and we need to create something that is appealing to players and build this talent base out. And that's not the fucking thing anymore. Like, you made big time moves to bring in big time talent. You have an all NBA point guard who's what, the second or third best point guard in the league, fourth at worst or something. You have an all NBA center who is one of the great big man shooters ever, self-proclaimed, but also just a fact. You have two wings who are among the best 3-and-D wings in the league. At least they were coming into their time in New York, in OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges. You have Josh Hart, who I don't think in an ideal world would start, but is clearly a great rotation piece. I think Deuce McBride...
He wins 6th man of the year every year if he wasn't starting. So,
he's certainly being in the conversation. I think Deuce McBride, I'm sorry, I'm just not going to watch these playoffs, and my takeaway from it being Deuce McBride is some unplayable fucking garbage man who, God forbid...
You don't agree with Tyrese?
No, I will never agree with Tyrese on that. Do I think he's a player you can upgrade on? Sure. I mean, yeah, I think you could upgrade on a lot of guys. You could upgrade on Campaign. I think you could upgrade on Deuce McBride. I think you could upgrade. That's a separate conversation.
You can upgrade on Cat.
Yeah.
There's a certain player in Milwaukee that you might be able to.
I don't think Deuce McBride is some unplayable garbage fucking level player. He's having a bad series. He is. I don't think that needs to be said. I think the Knicks probably were expecting more from him this year. Until you can provide me a way to utilize him in a trade that returns a better piece or a more useful piece or however the fuck you want to phrase it.
Is his salary a detriment in some ways at that point?
Stacy, Fucking forest trees. We don't need to do the Deuce McBride salary thing right now.
Forrest.
No. Like, so
well, I'm a very ignorant salary guy, so I always
no, but forget that. We can talk about trade stuff. Like, my point is, like, he's not some unplayable rotation player. Even amidst in this garbage of a series, he's clearly a guy you can play like 12 minutes, which is what Thibs has done, which is fine. Right? Tonight he had to play a little bit more because of a variety of reasons. It's fine. They didn't get fucking smoked in his minutes. He wasn't out there like completely fucking like destroying their team while he was out there. You know, like, I'm sorry, like, role players are gonna have swings, and some of those are gonna be more brutal than others. But like, he's clearly okay as a depth piece. Now, do you need more? Yeah, of course. We've talked about that all year. This is the reason why I didn't think coming into the season the Knicks were a true contender. I've been saying this since the start of the year. That's not why I'm being critical of Thibs. I'm not critical of Thibs because the Knicks I mean, whatever. They play Boston. I don't think that series will be pretty. But I don't, I'm not.
You didn't expect them to struggle this much, probably, with a team like Detroit.
I think it's reasonable to expect. Okay, fine. The first 4 games are tight. They go how they go. You're going home. Game 5 at home. Like, forget the first half. Like, the Celtics today, they were down 2 at halftime. Do you know
They
what the final score?
31.
Yeah, they won by 31 because they make adjustments and they come out in the second half and it's a totally different fucking ballgame. We've come out in the second half of every single fucking game and completely piss our pants and look terrible and look slow and lethargic and whatever. How is that not about coaching? I'm sorry. And then we talk, like, you can talk about the offensive scheme. You can talk about, how he managed the rotations, all these different things. It is not just about Deuce McBride, Josh Hart. That's just the fucking, that was just like, that was like shorthand for the broad things that we've talked about now for multiple years. Like, in 2022, 23, what the hell were we talking about? Oh, man, he should play quickly more than RJ Barrett. That would be great. That would be fucking fantastic for us.
Quickly more than Evan Fournier.
Yeah, that's 21-22. In 2021, it's why are you starting Elfrid Payton when he's going to be unplayable in the playoffs and you have the option to at least either start quickly or start Derrick Rose and whatever, go from there. Like, doesn't happen until the playoffs. Then he has to fucking come up with some fucking rotation out of his ass, which effectively involved him running Derrick Rose into the ground in games 2 and 3. And he didn't even finish the series, right? He didn't finish the series on the floor. Like, and then, last year, there could have been things that we talked about, but, injuries happened, trades were made. And I think things.
And I don't think either of us puts those injuries.
Oh, no, the injuries. I always think the injury stuff with him is bullshit. I don't put that on Thibs. I only bring up the Derrick Rose thing because he was clearly a player who he couldn't handle those minutes no matter what. And I think
he's 34
and Thibs didn't know how to because he didn't spend any time in the regular season trying to figure that out. So then his adjustment was just like treat Derrick Rose like it's 2011 and play him a fucking starting minutes load. And so, like,
and I think that relates. Sorry, I do want to. That relates to me. It's like he made the adjustment, but it was so late that they didn't have that time, right? I actually think I've liked the Knicks defensive scheme. I see Bridges and OG being used more to top lock. I see Cat playing close to the level of the screen more often.
The defense has been a lot better.
But our lapses, we also have a lot of lapses where Duran gets an open lane, and it's like that's going to happen. Osar and guys who can't do anything but dunk are getting those lanes, and that's going to happen when you're trying to play more aggressively. That's why you play it all season, right? So these growing pains don't happen in the playoffs, and that's what happens when you're just like, well, I'll do it when I have to, right? Which I do think parallels kind of the whole Elfrid Payton thing that you're bringing up. So I did want to mention that.
Yeah, and it's these things we're talking about. It's not like boiling it down to just like, well, guys got to make shots and if they made free throws. It's like, this is not like when you are not. What are we talking about in terms of maximizing the talent of this roster? Like, do we really what is the argument here that Thibs is maximize the talent of this roster? And I actually do have a lot of sympathy for him in the sense of we know Mitch coming back from injury, that's presented a difficulty in terms of like he's on a minutes limit. you're trying to work in, obviously, him into the rotation in general, but then you also want to get him and Cat minutes together, and that's a thing that kind of needs to be developed chemistry-wise. Like, I have some sympathy for him there. I have sympathy for him that the bench is not the best bench in the world. I mean, that's fucking an understatement and a half. But like, what I just fundamentally do not understand is you spent an entire year deploying the roster in this specific way, and now, to the point you're making in the playoffs, now we're seeing the Knicks do all this different defensive shit, and it's much better. Their defense has been much better. I don't think that's questionable. I think the fact that there's increased physicality being allowed has helped them. But I also
On
think that, like,
defense,
yeah. Like, but I also think that, like, you're seeing some of the sloppiness, when you're talking about Duran and Asar, the type of stuff that they're getting. I think you see some sloppiness in terms of, like, because you didn't work on a lot of this stuff all season, those back end rotations and the specific details you have to nail are not there because you're kind of figuring that out on the fly. Why was that a thing you couldn't try all season? Like, we spent an entire season of Mikal Bridges basically just being the point of attack defender for what, like 85% of it, probably more, where he was just the guy that did point of attack and that was it, and nobody else.
You never switch Brunson. You don't play Cat close to the screen.
Right. You don't have Josh Hart take some point of attack minutes. You don't have OG and an OB do it except for very, very specific matchups. Like, you didn't try any of this stuff, and now we're seeing you do it in the playoffs, and it's much better. But again, there's some margins you're leaving on the table because I think there's some miscommunications of what should be what, whatever. And then offensively, like, I just don't know what to say. Like, I really have no idea how you can watch how this team plays offense and truly believe that there's nothing more that we could strive for. I mean, we traded 5 first-round picks for Bridges, and I still have no fucking idea what is the intention of this player? What is the intention of how you want to use him? Because it ostensibly is mostly like he is just purely an off-ball guy. They don't run pick and rolls with him and Cat, Mikal Bridges and Cat, when Brunson's on the floor. They don't use Mikal Bridges as a ball handler when Brunson's on the floor. They don't, like, I can fucking run through so many different things right now. Like, we don't see, how many times have you seen a double screen, a stagger, like a set of stagger screens for Brunson? How many times do you see us coming up the floor in semi-transition and there's a drag screen? Like, there is nothing done to make things easier. It's all very, very safe. It's all very, very, like, we're going to get into our offense late. We're going to have got, and then you just look at, like, the off-ball kind of, like, once Brunson kind of initiates, watch how guys are spaced around the floor. I mean, look, you want to look at a fucking disaster play? Go look at that play, end of game 4. You know why we don't think of it as a disaster play? Because Cat bailed us the fuck out with a crazy 3. But go watch the spacing on that play. If you watch it back, all 5 guys are on the floor, basically between, like, top of the key and the right wing. That is where everybody is.
It's like a metaphor for American politics.
Yeah. Yes.
Everyone is middle and right wing.
So there's literally nobody on the weak side. There's no floor balance. But it doesn't matter because Cat made the shot. But those details matter. They always matter, whether guys make the shot or not. All it does, like, the result is not the end of it all. Like, the process matters. And I'm sorry, the process for this team, for whatever reason, I wouldn't say this about last year's team. I wouldn't say this about 2022-23. I might have questions about the personnel usage. I might have questions about why you would play Josh Hart and RJ Barrett together, whatever. I think their spacing principles and how they were positioned and all those things generally were very clean and very good. And this year,
people seem to be on the same page, right?
Yeah, and this year, I don't feel that way at all. I feel like they are super unorganized consistently on offense. I feel like there are times where, I mean, there was a possession the other game where Mikal and OG are, like, basically 3 feet next to each other in the same, like, on the same side, like on the corner. Like, that happens all the time. You see possessions where Josh Hart and OG are standing in the corner next to each other. Why is that happening? And if these things are happening consistently, and they have been happening consistently all year, and then, we've talked about endlessly, right? Oh, Cat, why the fuck does he not just stay spaced out sometimes and he'll just start cutting down the lane or whatever. There was a possession today where I think Cat was posting up and Deuce is on the opposite side wing, and then he just cuts down into the middle of the paint. And I'm like, I think that this was the play. I'm pretty sure.
Well,
I'm pretty sure this was the play where Cat
that
got
seems
fouled.
to be a tip. That's a
Right,
tip staple, though. We had that same complaint with Alfred Payton. I think there was a debate. I think you had
right.
with,
But
of
my
all
point
people,
is,
Tommy
I
Dave
don't,
about that.
and I still don't understand what the benefit of that really is. Like, I can understand that if it's Mikal Bridges, because Mikal Bridges is an elite. If Cat sees him cutting, and he can just get into a 16-footer, that's a great shot, especially in like a late clock situation. It's a good shot. That's a good shot to have. But that doesn't apply for everybody in your roster. There needs to be way more clarity on this stuff. And that's what is so confusing to me, because there was a clarity to this stuff in past seasons under the same coach, right? It's under the same head coach.
This roster has had much more turnover.
That's not an excuse to me. Last year we had plenty of turnover, and I think there was much cleaner principles.
Well, you have a new starting center. You have a new starting power forward.
We had a new starting center last year. We had a new starting, because over the course of the season, this happened.
Okay, but Hartenstein had been playing a lot.
Okay,
so
okay, fine. Don't give me Hartenstein. We traded for OG in the middle of the year. Pretty big fucking change. You lost your 6th man last year, right? Because you traded him in the trade for OG. So you have to, now you have Deuce McBride as your backup point guard, which we all know is not exactly what he's good at. Okay, you trade Grimes in the middle of the season for Bogdanovich and Burks. Those guys come in, and at least, did Burks do a lot of stupid shit when he first got here? Yeah, but we know those are things that Burks does. But in terms of like the pure principles of what you are doing, how you're spaced out, where guys are positioned,
I do think it's a larger degree of turnover this year. Like you replaced.
You've had a full fucking season, Stacy. You've had a full fucking season. You had a full season. You had a full season. You had training camp. You had all off season to figure out.
Right? That was the biggest change.
Okay, Cat didn't.
And you replaced the rim protecting roster.
Cat's had a great year
with Cat, right?
Okay,
that's a completely different player from Hartenstein.
You don't need a full fucking year to clean this shit up.
I agree. I agree with that. Yeah, I agree.
You don't need a full. And if you needed a full year to clean it up and it was cleaned up, great, all good. Like, I'm not going to sit here and bitch too much about the defense, because whatever, they fucked around for the first 82 games of the season basically, and then they come to the playoffs and he's kind of adjusted things, and you got to tip your cap and give him a lot of credit for that. But again, why did it take you the full season? I don't know. Why did you not choose to do anything different in the season? I don't know. And that, at least, we can sit here and be like, all right, well, the defense has kind of ticked up here in the playoffs. Good job, Thibs. The offense looks, all the stuff we were talking about in the back half of the season that were issues are the same things. And I'm just very, very frustrated by this. And I'm so tired of it becoming, well, this guy's not good enough, that guy's not good enough. If we had this thing, that would fix that. And there's always a reason why it can't. I'm sorry. There is no fucking way you're ever going to convince me coming into the season anybody should have thought that the Knicks, this is the Knicks' best possible vision, or like the best possible outcome is you playing a 3-6 matchup, and now you're going to game 6 on the road. By the way, I think the Knicks are like +5 in the series in total, in terms of total point differential. Like, that's not good enough. I'm sorry. And I reject the idea that anybody coming to the season would have signed up for this, because
maybe the Pistons are good.
They are good. I don't think that's not really important to me. I'm sorry.
So
the Knicks should be better than this team. They should be better than this team. And at some point,
well, they are right now, right? They're up 3-2.
All right, we'll see. Let's see. Maybe if they win the series, congratulations, good job. That's like, but this is like bare minimum stuff.
What I'm saying is your point of view, because this is mine, that a coach that maximizes this roster might get to game 5 against this team. I think the talent gap is massive.
Yes.
That's not a disrespect to Detroit. And again, the defensive oriented nature, the way they call the games, the playoffs, like, again, game 4, like I was not complaining because they call it the same ways on both ends. I mean, that favors Detroit, right? They're the less talented team and they play that style more. But I don't think it was uneven. And I'll say the same thing tonight. But yeah, that's kind of it, right? If you look at this team and you're +5 against, I think you have 5 of the 6 best players in the series. I personally think, and I think you would agree, I think I'm higher on Cade than you are. I think the Knicks have the 2 best players in the series. Why is this happening? Why is every game you haven't won one game very convincingly? Game 1 is the closest one, and that required a 21-0 run. You can either agree that you can believe that the roster is not a good fit, right? So the sum is less than the parts. You can believe the coach does not coach to that, is not coaching them schematically to get the most out of that. Or you can believe they are somehow not motivated or they don't want it enough. Options 2 and 3 both point to the coach. And I think option 3 is also a little difficult to believe because these are not career losers, right? The Villanova guys all won. They all have that chemistry. Cat has been on, for the most part, good teams. Bridges has been in the finals. OG, was in a pretty strong culture in Toronto. It seems like, why is it 3-2? Why is it this close? You can believe Detroit is just way better than we're giving them credit for, I guess. It's tough to not put a lot of this on Thibs. And that's what I'm asking people. Like, if you want us to absolve Thibs, why is this series that on paper and just looking at the talent and frankly, the reason the Knicks are up, why did they win game 4? Let's forget the foul stuff, right? Brunson and Cat were hitting insane shots. Those weren't schemed up by Thibs. And it shouldn't be this hard. It's very, like, why are we still talking about this series when me and you should be talking about what are we going to do against Boston on Saturday? We're still talking about this series. And there's something there. Like, you're not, this team is underachieving to be still in game 6, to be, as you said, a +5 differential. I'm really struggling to come up with other explanations beyond the coach.
I don't know. Look, you talk to people, there'll be people that'll tell you, well, they don't have enough guys that can create. They don't have X thing. They don't have Y thing. And all those things.
If we're getting swept by Boston, if we swept Detroit and get swept by Boston, fine. It should not matter in this series. One, you have 2 guys that have been able to just fucking dominate. It is such a massive, and like, you look at Detroit getting every time Cade is getting a pick and roll, he gets into the paint. They have very simple reads. They miss shots. They're not very good. Everything looks. I mean, am I wrong to feel like things look harder for the Knicks on offense than for the Pistons on offense? Which should not be the case on talent, but it is, right? Is that a wrong thing to say, or is that bias there, or like a negative bias, I guess?
I wouldn't say that I think the offense looks particularly easy for either team, to be honest. I think that Hardaway, I have to look up the numbers, so this could be totally wrong. It does feel like Hardaway Jr. and Beasley are hitting at a higher clip than kind of their comparable. I guess the guys that in our offense would be tasked to hit those similar shots. So, OG, McCall, Deuce, those 3 very specifically. We know they've really struggled from 3 in this series. Deuce for sure, McCall as well. OG, I think he was 2 of 15 from the corners coming into tonight's game. I don't know. I know he hit 1. I don't know what he did in the first half. Again, I didn't watch the first half yet, but I know in the second half he hit 1 corner 3. But I don't know how much that changed today. But like, I don't know. It really feels like. It feels like. I think last year's team was probably the best blend of talent, like overall talent level, plus guys that simply can operate in the kind of like setup that Thibs has offensively, I think they were much better. Like, I think Dante is a better improvisational player. And not only is he a better, I think their skill sets blended really well, right? Because Dante wasn't ever going to start like cutting down the lane. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he was staying spaced out. He was going to find space in the perimeter and make himself available for perimeter jumpers and threes. And obviously he had a quick trigger. I think that fit in nicely, right? With Brunson, who wants to get inside. Randall, who wants to get inside when he was healthy. Isaiah Hartenstein, Hartenstein, who I think is a more intuitive player with the ball in his hands in terms of like how he screens and his decision making and all of that from the top of the key. Cat isn't as good at that stuff. Cat is obviously much better at different things, but he's not as good in that specific way that I think Thibs does want to have his center generally operate. And
also better offensive rebounder. I mean, that's not a knock on that, but
no, he's a better offensive rebounder. And then obviously we know Hartenstein's a much superior defensive player to Cat. I just think that whole blend, how those guys mixed, the fact that our offense, like, I don't like the idea of saying that Thibs' offense lacks structure. I mean, I don't think it has no structure, but everything he says kind of lends itself. I mean, it flat out is, right? He always talks about it, right? The game tells you what to do. Guys have to read how the defense is playing and play off of that and make the right reads and all that type of stuff. I think this team needs more instruction. I think they need more instruction's the wrong word. I think they need more diversity in how players are used. Whereas I think last year's got, like, Dante is a less versatile offensive player in a lot of ways than a Mikal Bridges. That doesn't make Mikal Bridges easier to mix in, by the way. That can actually be more challenging because he's not just, hey,
jack of all trades versus master.
Yeah. Don't just stand around on the perimeter and jack up threes. There are other things I do. I think OG Anunoby is a talented offensive player, but he's also a talented offensive player who has some significant holes in his game, right? Can't really dribble, for one. He's clumsy kind of when he starts driving at times. He doesn't see the floor well, blah, blah, blah. I think
not really no shooter either.
Yeah.
Right? So.
I really struggle with this kind of like conversation because I don't fully think I'm like explaining it well, but I think there is the simplicity of the team last year in a lot of ways benefited Thibs. I think the questions and the stuff that he had to figure out was less complex. I think that suited him. I think that suited the guys on that team. But that team was never coming back. That team was never going to come back because Isaiah Hartenstein left in free agency. Like, that's it. It's pretty much that simple. If Isaiah Hartenstein is back in free agency,
and Mitch has been hurt, right?
Yeah, but Mitch doesn't give you some of the offensive ceiling stuff that Hartenstein could give you at the 5. I think with all of that, yeah, it's been a more challenging year for Thibs, and I'm sympathetic to that. And I understand his struggles, but I also don't think he's done much to really try and figure it out. And, you know, specifically, at least with Cat, look, if you want to say he got traded here right before the season started and blah, 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 if you want to say that that's part of the reason here for why it feels like sometimes we're not getting as much out of him, not necessarily as an individual. I think individually he's having a great season. There's no question about that. But in terms of how we're able to leverage his talent to make things easier for other guys on the floor, if you want to say that because of, you know, when he got here, that's just been a problem that can't be solved this season, I don't agree, but let's just say that that's the case. He knew Bridges was going to be here the entire season. So unless you're telling me that, like, this was I guess the idea is Bridges' role would be different if we didn't, like, I don't know. It just, I don't get that because I just don't watch. Sorry. I don't get watching Bridges and feeling like there's been real attempts to maximize his skill set.
Yeah, there's a couple things. One, I do think, I don't think it's wrong to hold the players accountable. I think a lasting image I'll have from this game is that the Knicks were down 3 late, and Brunson played terrific defense and forced a loose ball. And Tobias Harris got it in between Cat, who's bigger, and Mikal Bridges. Those were your 2 offseason acquisitions. Mikal Bridges, I think, in some of those things, I think there's a lot of fair criticism. I'm not going to call him soft. It does seem like in some of those plays, given his tools and his skill set, he should be coming up with more loose balls. He should be a better rebounder. The end of game 4, that call doesn't happen, right? The missed call that Detroit will talk about for, maybe this is something that distracts Michigan State fans from talking about the signs. But if Cat just secures that rebound, you don't even get there, right? Not Cat, sorry, Mikal. But I think the fundamental issue is, and you look at this with teams that just seem to perform better. You have the front office, you have the players, and you have the coach, and they all seem in line, right? Boston, you talk about part of the Knicks offense is the ball moves, right? People will make passes. Like a lot of times the guy will make a first pass, like they pass probably too much to Mitchell Robinson in the short roll. And then everybody has to do their job, right? It's kind of this weak link thing. The minute a guy doesn't immediately make the right read, you've lost it. And that's how this team is built to be. That's how Boston operates, right? I will say this. I don't think in terms of talent, there's a huge gap between Boston and New York. I think they've played together longer. I think they have more legitimate rim protection that can also play on the opposite side of the floor. And they have better depth. But in terms of the top end talent, I would say Tatum has risen to the level where I would put him slightly above Brunson right now. I know that might not be a popular take on this pod, but that's not a knock on Brunson. Tatum has been fucking incredible this year. But if I compare Brown to Cat, I think Cat is better. You go down the roster, there's a lot of close. Do I think Derek White and Mikal? I think Derek White has been better, but he's been utilized better. I think OG is better than Drew. So I think they match. In terms of talent, they match up. But you have a fundamental disconnect between what this coach wants to do. Thibs, if you put him in Oklahoma City, he would love that roster. Right, you have an ISO heavy guard. I mean, I don't think he would coach that roster the same way they've been coached. That's his roster. That's the ideal. His bunch of wings who are dogs on defense, can switch everything, very physical. They rebound well. He has a stretch 4 or 5 he can deploy creatively if he wants to. You would have Hartenstein, who we know he likes a lot. That's the kind of team he wants, but that's not the kind of team you have. There's that fundamental. This roster is built to be something like Boston. I'm not saying they can execute that, and you can talk about the individual processors and all that, but not all of these guys in Boston. I don't think Jaylen Brown has ever been considered some amazing processor. You talked about kind of, is there structure? Is there not? It is kind of, it's creativity within structure, right? And it's what do you emphasize? So I think what he emphasizes is don't turn the ball over. Put yourself in a position to get a shot that we can follow up with an offensive rebound. And I think that's, and kind of read where the space is. I think with Boston, I think the way they're situated, they have very specific reads. There could be a ton, and there's still creativity within that. But when you get the ball and you're Derek White and you're on the wing, you have a couple of things you check, and you do that so often it's automatic. That just is what seems to be missing, because I don't think that's what Tibbs's ideal team is a team that can defend really well, can grind you down, has one or two very good offensive shot makers who can get good looks, decent looks, not necessarily the most efficient, but without turning the ball over. And you pound the glass. You win the possession battle. You make life hard for the other team on offense, and you win that way. And you get to the foul line, right? Because you're going to the paint so much. I don't think that's a bad philosophy. I'm not here to debate that. But it is a mismatch right now for what this roster is built to do. And I think that's the fundamental disconnect. Does this team have an identity, right? That's been a question that's been asked. The answer is yes and no. In some ways they do, right? This is when people say that, they often wonder, is this team soft? Do they have the mental toughness? I think this team is incredibly mentally tough, right? To win game 4 the way they did. For Brunson, Brunson's mental toughness, I think, is, as far as I'd put it, as good as any, but that is MJ level. That is Mamba mental. Whoever your choice is, there's nobody whose mental toughness I'm taking over Jalen Brunson. I think you would agree. I think Cat has been mentally tough. He's had his downs. I think Mikal Bridges has shown. I think that's not the issue with this roster, the ability to fight through adversity and all of that. It's just the way that they play is not how they're designed to play. And I think that is a mismatch between the coach and the front office. And I think we saw that in 2021, 2022, where it probably would have made more sense to give Obi and IQ more minutes, right? It probably didn't make as much sense to give Alec Burks the point guard minutes, right? I think Alec Burks was still a very good player, and we've talked about this. Like, I always have to call that out because I don't think it should be understated that he was a good player for them. He shouldn't have been playing point guard. He should have been playing the same minutes at shooting guard. It was really Evan Fournier playing, or maybe even RJ had a good second half that year, so I didn't even want to say that. It is a fundamental mismatch, and that's what's causing a little bit of an identity crisis between how the coach is comfortable playing and what this roster is designed for. And that's not an excuse. I'm not excusing Thibs. I'm not excusing the front office. It is what it is, though. That's my diagnosis. Whereas I think Detroit knows what it's going to do, right? Detroit knows we're going to play through Cade. Schroeder's on the floor. We're going to play through Schroeder. We're going to set that high screen. We're going to get in the middle of the paint. Duran's going to look for those cutting angles. He's going to be a screener. He's going to crash the glass. Hardaway and Beasley are going to space and cut and move. They know where guys are going to be. They know exactly who they are, or how the roster was designed very much matches what they do. And I think that's for most playoff teams is the case. It just isn't right now for the Knicks.
I think Tibbs' offense is pretty simple, right? He wants to set the guys up that he views as his best two options, generally speaking, in certain spots on the floor that he thinks they're best at, in certain situations they're best at, in certain matchups at times that he thinks they're best kind of hunting. And then largely, I don't want to say this is the entire offense, because no offense is literally just this at the NBA level, but largely at that point, then it is then on that player to force help, collapse the defense, then, whatever, make a shot, so create space for their own shot, or, again, once you command the defense's attention, then setting up another guy. That's, I think, very broadly how he likes to set his team up, or how he kind of views offense. And I think there are real benefits to that, especially early in time in terms of forming a team's identity.
Well, you lower the turnovers, right?
Yeah, you lower the turnovers. Also, when you're first starting the job, like, it's a very easy kind of like, this is what we do. And that's it. Like, we do this and everybody buys into this thing. And I promise you, if we all buy into this thing and we do everything we do really, really hard and really, really, with the maximum effort and the maximum whatever, we will get results. And that's all well and good. And I think it's true. And I think it's a big reason why he's definitely done a good job in New York overall, and why the Knicks have had a lot of success and won a lot of regular season games. But your goal isn't just to win regular season games. Your goal is to ultimately win a championship. And even if we all can come into the season and look at the bench and be like, okay, well, even at full health, a bench of Cam Payne, Deuce McBride, Mitch Robinson, maybe Landry Shamet, maybe Precious Achua, that's probably not getting us. That's probably not good enough. And that's again why I thought the Knicks were not going to win a championship coming into the season. I've never once predicted the Knicks would win a championship. I thought before the season they were the second best team in the East. I think there's plenty of reason to look at this team right now. And forget this team. But I think, with the way Cleveland's ascended, they've vaulted into a level that the Knicks are not at right now. And that's okay for this year to me. Like, that's okay for me to me for this year, because I think it was very obvious with the moves they made that the bench was going to be a problem, and they needed time to replenish that depth. I've been saying this all year. So my issue isn't like, oh, we're going to lose to Boston. My issue is, what level of confidence do you have? Let's say the Knicks take care of business in Game 6. So I don't know when the hell fucking series against Boston would start. Maybe Sunday, maybe Monday. I don't really give a shit. Whenever it starts. What level of confidence do you have that the Knicks are actually competitive in that series, based on what we've seen so far this year? And that, and I've said this all fucking year, and I've said this today. I'll still say this today. The Knicks could go 7 games with fucking Detroit, eke out a Game 7 win at home on a fucking buzzer beater that is like the Kawhi buzzer beater to beat the fucking to beat the Sixers, and then they could play a 6 or 7 game series against Boston that's competitive, where they are making the Celtics work for it. And these are games where, there's chess matches happening between the coaches and whatever. And if that's how it played out, I'd be like, keep Thibs. That's my standard for him this year. My standard was never go win the fucking championship. My standard was play a team like Boston, show me that you can match wits and bring your group to a level where they look like, hey, maybe they can't get it done this year, but now with those pieces that maybe we can get in free agency or via trade or whatever avenues you have to acquiring better depth pieces, they can get there. And the biggest issue that I have with Thibs this season is I do not believe that he is getting us there. It does not feel like that to me. It feels like, we're further away from Boston than we were last year. And I don't mean that in terms of like, oh, like if you wanted to argue last year's team was better suited to matching up with Boston for XYZ reasons related to like the actual personnel on the roster, I don't think that's an insane argument. I think that's a reasonable argument. I think it's a pretty interesting argument actually to have. But the last year's team would play Boston, and you didn't feel like every game against them was like this total fucking shit show where you just completely outgunned. I mean, the last time we played Boston last year, the Knicks fucking waxed them.
Boston was not.
I don't buy that. They played their entire starting lineup and they were like full court pressing Brunson. I do not buy that they were not trying. And the Knicks destroyed them. The Knicks absolutely destroyed them. They played them the opening game of the season, game they easily could have won. Close game, though, doesn't happen for them down the stretch. Now, the Knicks' last game against Boston this year was close. That's a game they probably should have won. But it's also a game where I think you saw some of the limitations in terms of his creativity, his offensive scheme, where it's like, well, I want Josh Hart on the floor. Again, very reasonable. Josh Hart played well in that game. They're defending Josh Hart at the center. How can I leverage this? And far too often, the only answer is like, well, Josh Hart will screen for Brunson, and that's that. and Cat will be a bystander on offense, and Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby will sit around the perimeter waiting for threes, and that's what it is. And that, like, we're in year 5 of this guy as the coach, and our end game offense, pretty consistently over 5 years, has routinely devolved or become, anyways, the best player on the team in a matchup that Thibs thinks is a great matchup, or the best matchup, or the best thing to do, isolating and getting a shot up that they, whatever, wherever that shot may be from. That's the offense.
And it has a spillover effect because I think you've talked about this with OG, and it's very noticeable. Even he hit that late 3, he looked off Brunson. And then I think on the Strickland chat, Dallas mentioned, well, he hadn't touched the ball in 10 minutes. I was like, well, yeah, but that shouldn't dictate the shot. But it has a spillover effect. I mean, I think the way this team is built is that every guy on the floor has to be a threat. I'm not saying that is how every team needs to be built. But that is how the team is built, and that's not his philosophy. He wants guys to fill specific roles and be outlets, but 1 or 2 guys to control everything. Maybe that is Brunson specific. I think he did a good job playing off of Luka, but he's a very different player now. I think he would do anything to win. I think we've seen that. And I think he did a good job playing off of Julius Randle, who isn't exactly the most deferential or best off-ball player. I think when you compare to last year's team, I do discount that Celtics game because I saw Isaiah Hartenstein in the playoffs last year struggle against 2 teams that went 5 out.
But Stacey, my point wasn't like I don't think either of us believes if they played the Celtics last year, they would have won that series, right? And I think, that's not a knock on the team or the roster. That's just like that Celtics team last year with KP, who was mostly healthy until the playoffs, funny enough. But Drew was healthier last year. Jaylen Brown was way better last year than he has been this year. Tatum actually has been better this year, but he was obviously very, very good last year. Whatever. Like, I think we know that collective group was probably a step beyond what that Knicks group was capable of. That was my point. Was only that, like, you at least watch them go into Boston, a game that I think Boston 100% took seriously, and they went in there and they beat the fucking brakes off them. They beat the shit out of that Boston team in Boston. We haven't seen this team do that to really any of the elite teams in the league.
The 3 elite teams. They've done that to Denver, Memphis.
I mean, they did it to the Pacers. They smoked the Pacers second game of the season. They also beat them by double digits on the road in Indiana as well. So they've had good wins. I'm not, of course, not denying that. But to be where the Knicks are, and then to feel like, for me, this is just me. Maybe people disagree with this. If there are people that that think either this team will or 100% still can be competitive against Boston this year over the course of a series, okay. And if you believe that this roster just never had a chance to even be remotely competitive against a team like Boston or Oklahoma City or Cleveland now, who is making this, who has made this leap as a team, okay, fine, fair enough. Then maybe we just disagree on kind of what we should expect coming in the season. But for me, I think it's a reasonable expectation to be like, yeah, I don't think we could beat Boston, but I think you can go into that series and you got a puncher's chance. And a puncher's chance to me is like, all right, you push the games, whatever. It could be 5 games, it could be 6 games, but the games are competitive, and maybe if the right things break your way, right, injury luck, or X player gets hot on our team and Y player on their team gets cold, like maybe things break your way and it's whatever. Right now, it just feels to me like we would need injury luck. We would need inexplicable poor shooting performances by multiple players on a team like Boston. I'm just using them again as shorthand because they're the team that we would play if we advance in this series. We would need inexplicable bad shooting luck for them, really good shooting luck for us. Maybe some weird anomaly of just inexplicable brain farts from Joe Mazzulla as the coach. Whatever. Josh Hart doing like a Philly, series shooting 3-point shooting performance. Like it feels like we would need all these things to break in our way just for that series to be competitive. And I'm sorry, like, I think that's pretty unacceptable given the talent on this roster. And yeah, the depth might not be good. I think with the Mitchell Robinson you saw tonight, with Jalen Brunson, with Karl Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, like, I think
Deuce even, right?
yeah,
Deuce is
like I
sick,
think
man.
those 7 guys should be enough that one, this series should be over. 2, we should not ever be scoring 94 points twice in this series. Twice in the series, we scored 94 points. Not even hit the 100 mark. And 3, not feel like, oh, when we play Boston, we're just going to get annihilated. I think that's fair. And yes, I think it's more than fair to say the Knicks do need another ball handler off the bench, a better ball handler than Cameron Payne.
Another wing,
another
probably a
all
more
those
reliable 2 big lineup.
yeah,
than
what
Mitch.
all of those things can be true. And I still do not think that excuses the notion of like we go into this series and get annihilated, which feels like the inevitable outcome of this season.
If we win games 6
Right.
or 7. But
Right.
so you mentioned 2 things. You mentioned either you don't believe this roster is good enough, or you believe that
And just very specifically, not good not like, I don't think this roster is good enough to win a championship. But like if you do not believe this roster is even good enough to be competitive against a team like a Boston or a Cleveland or OKC or something, that's where I disagree with that, because I think they're having a good enough roster. They certainly have a good enough starting 5, or at least whatever. They have enough good players that they should be competitive in those series. And if you cannot even muster competitiveness, that's a concern. So look, this series can go how it goes. If the Knicks lose the series, I'm sorry. I'm just going to be of the opinion that Thibs that should be an automatic.
I actually think that would happen. If they lose to Detroit in 7 games, they blew a 3-1 lead. We've seen how I think the second apron era has delivered a bit. I don't know if that's the right conclusion for front offices to take, but it certainly has driven a sense of urgency. We've seen some coaches. We see Denver, Memphis. I don't think Leon Rose would be out of that. We've seen him, he parted ways with Randall. He's been willing to move on from people he has good relationships with. He does right by them, which makes me think that if they were to do that, they would probably try to get Thibs into a front office position. But you said that there's 2 real conclusions or 2 real points of view you can have, right? Either you believe this roster simply isn't good enough to be competitive with Boston, or you believe that they will be, and this is just, they're struggling with a good Detroit team, whatever. If you believe the first thing, I think it's why do you believe that, right? And there's the 2 main reasons I've heard from people is that you can't win with Cat. Cat has to be the 4, right? Or you cannot have Cat and Brunson together. Period. I think you would still want to be able to get as much information. If that is the case, you would want to get as much information as possible on how true those things are, right? So number 1, with Cat at the 4, that is an option, right? I actually think this gives me a little bit more confidence. Having seen Mitch, I do have a little bit more confidence in them being able to at least win a game or 2 against Boston than I did in the regular season. We talked about this, right? Like, as much as people make the Mitch can't switch and all of that, nobody really wants to take pull-up threes against Mitchell Robinson and drop, besides maybe Jason Tatum, and that he does that against everyone at this point. And you get the Porzingis pops, but those are issues anyway for every center in the league. I think he would be much better, and he gives you a boost on the offensive glass. So I think you get some data there if you use that properly. 2, if you actually think that the Brunson-Cat dynamic will never, ever work, you would want to see a coach exhaust that, right? This is the scientific method, right? When you eliminate all of the possible hypotheses of how this can work, then you can conclude that it can't work. And then I would buy that first argument that this was never going to be a thing. And the other part of it is like the other issue that I think you and me both bring up is that the Knicks don't have great depth, right? They need another scorer off the bench. They could use another wing. Maybe they need a more reliable big than Mitch. That shouldn't skew a series so much. That would hold more water if the starting lineup wasn't basically treading water. And it's a very talented starting lineup. It doesn't forget Josh Hart and the Deuce McBride thing. This is an extremely talented starting lineup with Josh Hart. He's a damn good player. He's averaging 14, 9, and 5 for the season. He's played a hell of a series, I think, against Detroit. That the depth does not seem to be the issue with this team. That's not what's driving so many of their issues. So then it has to be
just to your point, just very, very basic level thing that you could just do, right? Let's say the depth, if your argument is the depth is the issue, right? So the Knicks have lost, they're losing this game because of depth. Their worst stretch of the game was to start the fucking third quarter. That's been their worst stretch of the entire series. The entire series, their worst stretches come to start the third quarter. That is when, presumably, the Knicks have their 5 best players out there. Or at least the 5 best players as Thibs sees them. And then they generally do make a pushback into the games to take the lead or whatnot when bench guys start getting sprinkled in. Now,
and a lot of that is with Brunson and Cat on the floor together, right? So it's not even they just fit bad together. So
right. It's not that. And to be clear, it's not been every game, right? Game 4, we know that they didn't really get back into the game until Bridges hit a couple fucking crazy threes in the fourth quarter. Then Brunson comes back in, he goes nuts, whatever. So it's not every single game, but what has been the case for every single game is the starters at the start of the second half get fucking blitzed. And they've not been particularly dominant in any game to start other than game 4, which was a very weird game, right? The Knicks are up 56-40 at one point, and it feels like, all right, they've got a chance here to blow this team out. Brunson misses a layup. They go down and hit a 3, and all of a sudden the game kind of changes right then. So it's not every game, or 46-30, whatever. We don't need to get into what the specific score was. But, obviously it's not every single game is exactly played out the exact same way. But what has been true is their worst minutes are coming to start the third quarter when all the starters are on the floor, which is presumably the lineup that you trust the most, which is apparently the best, okay, well, why are you losing those minutes constantly?
And even if it's not
if fatigue were to be blamed, right? If we're going to because he's playing these guys, because he has to play these guys so many minutes, well, they just don't have the juice at the end of games. But we've seen them pull away at the end of they pulled away at the end of game 1. They also were able to pull away a bit at the end of game 3. I think the final score makes it look a lot closer than it really was. And then obviously game 4, they were able to pull out in very dramatic fashion. But those guys played their best at the end of those games. So I don't think it's really, I don't know. I didn't watch this game today and feel like, oh, these guys are just running on empty. That's the problem here. So I don't quite understand the depth argument as it pertains to the series. Not because I don't think the depth argument is accurate at the level of holding this team to a contention kind of standard, but that's not what beating Detroit is. And so I just can't get to the point where I'm it's totally understandable to not just potentially the Knicks are still in a good position to win the series, right? You have tries to win 3 in a row. Very, very hard to do. They have to win a game 7 on the road at the Garden. Obviously, they won 2 of 3 at the Garden though in the series, so who the fuck knows? But they haven't really been able to have a dominant victory in this series, and that's very concerning to me because at some point, I think we can just look at the rosters and be the Knicks have more talent. And if you have more talent, at some point you should have a dominant victory. I mean, we're watching a fucking Nuggets team who fired their coach fucking 5 minutes before the playoffs. Okay? We're down 2-1, looked absolutely dead in the water, pull out a game 4 on the road, and then
they have the greatest player in the world, though.
Right. But my point is, they were underdogs coming into the series. They're underdogs coming into the series. They lost home court, and they were in a position where they could have lost. But they won today even by 16 points. So they have a dominant victory on their books. Like our most dominant, and that's a game they were up double digits pretty consistently throughout. Our most dominant victory was game 1, which required a crazy 21-0 run in the first quarter that felt like a fucking fever dream. So, like, fourth quarter. But when are we going to see the best version of this team? Because the argument that I think Thibs would have made if you were to give him truth serum and be like, why did you just like play the starting 5 so much all season, regardless of how individual guys played, regardless of how guys off the bench were playing, if they're out playing, guys in the starting lineup, whatever.
How the lineups work together also.
Yeah. Right. Why were you so kind of like dead set on this? And I think his answer would be because I want them to get all the reps they need, because once we get to the playoffs, that's going to be the 5 that I have on the floor. And I want them to kind of work through all the kinks they have through the regular season. Okay, well, that's fine. So then your bet is those guys should be, and they are talented, right? They are, let's say, the Knicks 5 most talented players.
You get 2 all-stars, a guy who should be all defense. Your 4th option is Mikal Bridges, and another guy who should be average 14, 9, and 5. So, yeah, that's a lot of talent. That should be a starting lineup that wins most of its minutes.
So when is that starting 5 going to be dominant in this series? And not just dominant for a game or for a quarter or a half, but for a full game. And it just hasn't happened. It hasn't happened at all. And, look, that's the bet he made. And if you want to, again, be critical of the roster because the front office consolidated depth pieces and blah, 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 fine, fair enough. That's where I'll disagree with it. I think that he has done an adequate job this season. But, what do you see that you're like, well, if we just get the better depth pieces, then he will be able to coach us to a championship? Because, yeah, do better depth pieces make it easier to beat the fucking Pistons? Yeah, of course it would. Because the Pistons are kind of like where we were in 2021, right? They have some good talent. They have a rising star who's kind of establishing himself. All of these things. But they really don't have as much talent as we do. And yet they're right there right now in this series. I don't know. We can talk about it round and round, but I think we're basically saying the same things here, where it's like, is he really getting the most out of this roster? And I don't really know what the argument is for it, because the argument is basically just like the bench sucks. And that's that. Like, I don't know. To me, that's not
I think the argument could also be that Brunson and Cat, that gives you 2 defensive liabilities. Can you play them both, right? So I think we come back down to this same thing. I think we can both eliminate that if the depth was really the issue, you would see that the starting lineup has 2 all-stars, an all-defensive player, or that caliber, another guy who, a 4th guy really in Mikal Bridges, who is very capable, efficient scorer. And then you have Josh Hart, who is a jack of all trades, who is very good playmaker, rebounder, can finish really well. That lineup should win its minutes. The fact that it's been neutral, it doesn't help the depth is the issue argument. The fact that also Brunson and Cat win their minutes on aggregate most of the time also doesn't help that argument that they don't fit well together. But even if you wanted to go on that space, you would want to say, can we learn as much as possible? If we need to make a decision on Cat Brunson together, can we exhaust everything we've tried? You're not getting that with Thibs. Then you would say that the second option is that, well, actually the way it's constructed, you don't see it. There's the net ratings, blah, blah, blah. But actually this is a very good team. And they will give the Celtics a strong fight. Then you should be willing to use that as a referendum. You should be willing to look at that as a referendum if you think they're there. And if you don't think they're there, then you should think that the coach that they have should be trying to get as much information or put as much information out there for the front office to make if we need to make a decision, if that's what it comes down to, Cat and Brunson just ain't going to work together. Or you need you need a more reliable big. Maybe that's what it'll come down to, right? They'd say that, well, actually, I think this might happen, right? In the Mitch minutes, maybe they do really well against Boston. They say, well, this isn't a guy we can trust for 30 minutes, but clearly Cat works well with a rim protector. Maybe that's all we need, and that lets Thibs stay around for another season. But other than that, you should either want as much information as possible if you are skeptical about this roster construction, which means trying as many different things as possible, or you should be willing to use the Boston series as a referendum on Thibs. It's one or the other. And I don't think, I think, yeah, like he's not giving you the first one. So then you have to show that you've done enough with this roster that if you believe it as a talent, if you believe they're good, that they can put up a fight.
Yeah, and I think there's also just like weird things with this team that, to me, do stem from leadership. Like they're so often totally off, like tilted. Like that third quarter, they just completely lose their composure in terms of like how they're reacting to officiating. And
that
guys,
happened in game 4 as well.
Right. And it's like you can't, when that happens consistently, that is to me about coaching. Like, because at some point, then Thibs needs to take that off them and be like, guys, shut the fuck up. I'll talk to the ref. I'll handle that. When like you focus on winning the fucking ball game, I will focus on the officiating. But we had an entire quarter again where, Hart's yelling at the ref. Brunson gets teed up. And the Brunson thing, I understand why he got teed up. That was a ridiculous missed call. But like, you got to keep playing. You can't just start screaming at the fucking ref. Like,
Thibs got to be like Coach Yost and Romero Titans, right? Like, I don't want them to gain another yard, but they saw him talk to the ref, right?
So like, I just like it's so weird. Like, they just get completely tilted. They have these long stretches where they just seem lost offensively, and they're not getting into anything. And then you just have these disastrous, kind of messy possessions. And then another hallmark of Thibs teams consistently, and this has been consistent regardless of what you think of the talent in any given season, but especially I think over the last 3 where they've been a really good offensive team in the regular season, and then last year they were a really good offensive team in the playoffs. But even last year in the playoffs, they would have these weird stretches where it's like for 4 minutes they can't get a good, they just can't make a shot, and they also don't get any good shots. And it's like, I don't get why that happens. And it just stems from like where you're watching and you're like, why is this so disorganized? And then look, at a very basic level, how are you just not running more Cat and Brunson pick and rolls? I'm sorry, I can't get over that. Like, I cannot get over that. If you want to just, like, I think there's some fair kind of skepticism of, well, how good was Mike Malone really, right? Like, how great a coach really was he? I know he won a championship, but he had Jokic, who was the best player in the world, and, they had a favorable run and blah, 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 whatever. Okay. The one fucking thing that guy did was he would run fucking Jokic and Murray pick and rolls to death in crunch time, right? Murray and Jokic pick and rolls, Murray and Jokic dribble handoffs, whatever the case may be. You ran action with your 2 best players. The Knicks eschew that constantly. I mean, I think it was Fred Katz that had an article, it might have been last week, it was after game 2, I believe, where he talked about how, like, for the first 3 months of the season, Cat was setting like 27 screens a game. And over the final 3 months of the season, it was down to 14. I have no idea what that number is in the playoffs. But why is he screening way less? And why is he screening less for Brunson? Like, at the beginning of the season, it was like we wanted more Brunson Cat pick and roll, but we at least kind of saw that as a staple of the offense pretty consistently. And now, as the season's gone on, it feels like we are somehow seeing less and less and less of it. And I barely remember it today. There were a couple possessions that were okay, but they definitely did it. But it's like, it's not enough. I just, it's hard to fathom. It really is hard to fathom that, like, I don't know. Again, we could probably just leave it here. It's pretty fucking late. And I think we've probably just said the same exact things for the last 85 minutes. But, I'll just leave it with this. Like, I just don't know how you watch this team, watch their offense, and come away from it thinking this is the best version of what this team could possibly be on the offensive end of the floor. And
even like 75%, to be honest.
yeah, it just doesn't feel that way at all. It feels quite the opposite. And it's interesting because the start of the season, I thought was really good offensively. I was really, really impressed. And basically ever since OKC started, they just put a center on Josh Hart, every other team started doing that. And the Knicks have really not found their rhythm consistently ever since then. Like, think about some of the offensive explosions they had this season. How many of them were towards the end of the year? Barely any. I mean, the last one I can think of where you're like, wow, fucking massive, explosive offensive game was that blowout they had of Memphis at the Garden. That's the last one I can remember. But, this was a team that we saw multiple historic offensive performances to start the season, right? So it was like, they had that monster game against Minnesota where Cat went nuts. They had the big game against Denver in Denver. They put up, they've put up big numbers on a lot of teams. So that was happening fairly consistently earlier in the season. And then it's not happening towards the end of the season. And now we're in this playoff series where it's like,
Slog.
It's a slog.
And it's a slog, and it's like, it's so reliant. I mean, they win game, like, they have had, we praise Brunson a lot. You shouldn't need, sometimes just let him be Clark Kent. We should be able to, this roster is built so that if Brunson is Clark Kent once in a while, it doesn't matter, right? It always matters. That's kind of the thing. Or Cat has to be Clark Kent, right? But with the way it's built, everyone is supposed to be a threat. And that's the difference between, if you watch, I was on Locked On Knicks right before this, talking with Alex. Like, I like the thing is with Josh Hart, like, we fixate on it, but it's also, it could work. Josh Hart in the starting lineup. I mean, I was like, you watch.
I think it can work. This is why I've never advocated for him to leave the fucking starting lineup, because to me, there are very clear ways to use the fact that teams are defending him with a fucking center who isn't even really defending Josh Hart, right? Like that possession today where he got that wide open three from the break. Duran's like fucking, he might as well just be at the rim. Like he wasn't even close to Josh Hart. There are ways to use that in your advantage. Like I think Caitlin Cooper, sorry.
I've done that a lot.
Yeah. I think Caitlin Cooper wrote an article last year about like the value of non-shooters, actually. Like there's a way to value it because of the way teams defend them. And if they're not going to defend you, you know what you can do? You can go fucking set some off-ball screens. That's what you can do. But those need to be like kind of installed into the offense and be very...
It needs to be part of what everyone is doing, right?
Right.
Like, so what I was saying is, if you watch Golden State, I have seen them roll out lineups with Jimmy Butler, not a three-point shooter, Draymond Green, definitely not a three-point shooter, Gary Payton II, definitely not a three-point shooter, together, Shwin. All three are worse. Would you agree that all three are worse three-point shooters than Josh Hart? Butler's his own thing because he can mid-range, but that should have worse spacing than a team with four shooters and Josh Hart, right?
Yes.
In theory. Now,
yes.
The one thing I did leave out is that they have the best shooter of all time, who is basically a fusion of Dante, Jalen Brunson, Mark Price, any guy you want to name. But that they make it work, right? They work. So, like, if Thibs is going to have these constraints, we can definitely talk about Deuce over Hart. But, like, one shooter should not nuke a lineup, not with Cat and Brunson. And Bridges is your third or fourth option. That's what's just excruciating to watch, because there's no reason this team should be like, we talk so much about Josh Hart as like a team's leaving open, but to your point, one non-shooter can be used strategically.
I mean,
and you have teams with three, and sorry, I know that Steph is Steph, and I'm not saying Brunson is Steph, but he can do a lot of those things.
What I find especially weird about this too is I think Hart has played his best offensively in this series for stretches. Like some of his best offenses come when he's on the floor with Mitch, right? Like who provides zero spacing. He
At
like
least off
is
Instagram. But
yeah, he's like a negative spacer in terms of what like the space he's providing. And also obviously is not some skilled player with the ball in his hands, which I would love if one day the Knicks would discover this when he's running the floor in transition.
Yeah.
But like,
Stop treating him like he's Wes Welker or Cooper
yeah,
Crawford.
like, yeah, it's enough. But like, I just, it's just weird. Like, I don't know what else to say. I really don't. And the point I've made about like, they were really good at the start of the fucking season, right? First 3 months, they're like a top 4 offense, whatever the hell they were, top 3 offense. Last 3 months, they're very, very mediocre offensively. And it's, it's not just that they're mediocre offensively. We saw them, right? You went from being an average 3-point volume shooting team, which to me is fine. I have no problem with that. I don't think you need to be a high volume 3-point shooting team to win. I think it depends on your personnel. I don't think the Knicks have a bunch of high volume 3-point shooters. So you can understand why they're not going to be the highest volume 3-point shooting team. They went from like 15th, 16th to fucking like dead last over the last 3 months of the season. I think they finished the year 27th in 3-point attempt rate. Like, these are damning stats. And they speak to me, like, we can sit here and talk about what it is. Like, what specifically changed? What clearly something changed, right? Clearly something changed, and presumably, I think it's probably safe to say, whatever changed is likely down to how opponents started defending you, adjustments they made to what you were doing to start the year, right? First 3 months, you're going through the schedule, and then you start seeing teams again, right? Second time, third time, maybe fourth time. They have a better concept of what they're going against. And then they see a team like OKC, oh, they defended him in the center. Let's try that out. They try that out. Okay.
Well, even between the first and second games, right? OKC went to that switch in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And that shut down the Knicks offense and they're trapping more. And the second game was a blowout, right? So even that happened those were like within a week of each other, those 2 games or something like that. But
it was 1 week. It was exactly 1 week. It was a Friday and then a Friday. And like, if you're just forget the X's and O's, that's very clearly something telling you like, okay, every team has weird blips in the season. Everybody's going to have a downturn, right? The Cavs ended up losing 4 straight at one point towards the end of the season. Like, weird things happen and teams get into slumps. That's not wrong to me or some huge red flag. What's a red flag is that nothing really changed the entire season. And forget fucking lineups. Like, literally, forget lineups. Forget, oh, you want to Deuce, this guy wants Josh Hart, what? Forget that shit. Forget the players. It's about how are you deploying these pieces and how are you trying to get the best version of what you can be. And I just don't understand how not you obviously specifically, but anybody in general could have watched this team for the last 3 or 4 months of the season now, including the playoffs, and felt like, yeah, this is about, what else can he really do here? What else could he possibly do? I mean, you remember that game against Boston? Like, we've been playing a couple games against Boston where you're like, why does it feel like everybody is just running into the paint, regardless of the fact that they have like 3 fucking guys waiting for us there? And when you see shit like that, you just wonder, like, what the fuck are you guys even talking about before the game? What is the game plan that you are looking to, like, implement? It just, there's too many games. I mean, even last game, game 4, what did the Knicks shoot at the fucking rim? 9-28 or something? Like, I get it. I get that they have shot poorly from 3. OG, fucking Deuce, fucking Mikal. Basically, it feels like everybody other than Cat almost has like been subpar from 3 to some extent. I get it. But you've got to fucking trust the pass. And it needs to be hammered home, right? It needs to be from the coach, very intentional. Like, yeah, you can tell me spray the ball out, read the game, but it's like you have to, if you can't pass that message on to your players, if that message isn't getting through to your players, that is on you as a coach. And, it doesn't mean he's a bad coach. I will never say he's a bad coach. I'll never, I won't, look, I've defended him for his like development of players. I think he's a good development coach, even though he's weird with how he then maybe deploys players. He like does the hard part of developing players at times, but then doesn't like get the benefit from it because he doesn't necessarily trust them enough. But he's a great. I think he's a really good development coach. I think he's a really good foundation coach. I think he's a guy who gets you from A to B. But can you get from B to
He's
C?
a good big man coach, I would say too.
Yeah,
I think every
he is. Their fundamentals generally improve under him, other than Precious, but that's probably just a Precious thing. So whatever. But like, he's great to get you from A to B. Is he there? Can he get you from B to C? And also, like, I actually just want to close with this. The front office made their big bet. Okay, they made a big bet on Mikal Bridges. They made another bet, a pretty big bet, on Karl Anthony Towns. These are their main pieces. These are the pieces that they decided, after years of keeping the powder dry, staying somewhat flexible, making moves on the margins. These are the moves that they decided were necessary and probably, not probably, you would assume, given the the cost of what they did, optimal for their team. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe they're 100% wrong. Maybe they fucked everything up. We can't dismiss that possibility. But if that is your belief, if that was, you make those big bets, then you need to ask yourself a very fundamental question, which is, if I made those bets and I believe in this core to be competitive, now maybe they need a little bit more off the, maybe they need a couple more guys, sure, but this core can get there. The question you have to ask yourself is, does Thibs help us get there? And then also, I think it's the kind of like ballsiest thing they could do, because once you fire the coach, right? Once they fire Thibs, at that point, what you're saying ultimately as a front office executive, what you're saying is, this coach did not do a good enough job with the talent we have on this roster, and I believe in the talent on this roster. So that's what ownership is going to take from that. So now, whatever happens, whoever you replace him with, whatever happens after that point, the results are on you. They're on you, Leon Rose. They are on you, World Wide West. They're on you, Brock Aller. They are on you. So I think the idea that firing Thibs would be scapegoating him, or, you can't fire him because, he's the one answering questions.
You signed the extension also.
Yeah, I think that's all bullshit. I think, and I thought it was bullshit when people use that argument for like this is what, if they fire Thibs, you know what'll happen? 100% guarantee. This is a guarantee. I will guarantee this. They fire Thibs after this season, whatever it is. If they lose to the Pistons, they lose to Boston, whatever. If they fire Thibs, what's will happen? Multiple national writers and media writers, local guys, and probably some other people that cover the team will say, well, Thibs did a good job here, and this roster isn't it, and he was kind of scapegoated because of the choices that the front office made. That's bullshit. That's not scapegoating. It's not scapegoating, because scapegoating isn't like you don't scapegoat somebody by then having the fucking onus put entirely on you, which is exactly what was my belief when they fired Fizdale. We're like, oh, they scapegoated Fizdale. I was like, no, they literally are saying the fucking coach sucks and isn't getting the best out of this roster. So we think
it was a rudderless roster, though.
Right, a gutted and rudderless roster. So now the onus is on them. And guess what happened? Guess what fucking happened? Did Steve Mills keep his job? Or was he fired? I think he was fired. I believe he was fired or removed or reassigned or whatever the fuck, James Dolan did with him. He was gone.
I think he's part of Doge now.
Maybe. He might be an upgrade for them. And Scott Perry, yeah, he kept his job, but we all know he was marginalized, right, within the confines of the new front office. That's what happened. People lost their fucking jobs because once you fire the coach, the onus is on you as a front office. And they should feel that pressure. I'm sorry, they should feel that pressure. if the decision to keep Thibs is because like, well, if we fire him, then it's going to be on us, and we need to buy it a little bit more time. Like, I think that's cowardly. That would be cowardly if that was part of their decision making.
And
I
they
don't
don't
know.
look if they went 5 first-round picks for Bridges, I don't think they're cowardly, right?
Right.
They're already committing. So you'd
But,
have
but
to
if,
think that we have to make this work, and we have to
right.
exhaust every way to make this work. If we're going to pivot, we're going to pivot. But if there's some part of this that is preventing that from working that's in our control, we are pot committed right now. So,
and it's just like that should, if their logic is more about like what's ideal for giving them more time or job preservation, while I can understand that on a human level, I think that would be really disappointing and not the type of decision making you want from a front office when they're
yeah,
kind of
we're not talking about
committed.
workers making 80 grand a year. We're talking about multi-million-dollar coach on a human level who has another good. I mean, he could probably get another job if he wants one, and you can put him in the front office, right? So,
Yeah. But yeah, I just like the front office has made their bets, and maybe you don't have the right player to kind of maximize your chips here. Maybe you need somebody else. Maybe you need Johnny Chan.
sorry, John, I don't remember. Maybe you need a taller 1A.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I just a lot of thoughts. First half of this pod is me screaming and yelling like a madman, so I don't know if people really want to listen to much more of this. But yeah, look, I think it's easy for all of us to kind of lose all sense of levity after games like this, and I'm certainly not fucking innocent of that. But
Are you vaxxed?
you know,
You can get a vax for that.
I could get a vax for that. But regardless of that, like the reason why I think it's so frustrating at times is these aren't criticisms that haven't been levied before, and I would rather be wrong. I would rather be wrong. I would much rather be wrong than fire Thibs, because I think he's underperforming. I would much rather be wrong. I would much rather. I like Thibs, contrary to popular belief. I like him. I think he's a good coach, but I think that he's kind of run his course here. I don't think his voice and message is carrying through to this group of players.
Should we have term limits for NBA coaches?
I think that's something to consider. Larry Bird thought that. I don't think his message is getting through to this group the way it has with previous groups. And I think that has a lot to do with the makeup of this group. And I'm not talking about like, oh, McCall's soft and Cat's this and whatever. No, I think you have I think a guy like Cat probably has a pretty decent understanding of like the things he's good at and the best ways to leverage those skills for him individually and for the team collectively. And I think
Does he?
I think so. I think he's definitely.
He passes. I don't think the shooting instinct is natural there.
The shooting,
he
but
drives a lot when he should shoot.
That's not the fuck. You're trying to debate the fucking details. Do you think Cat does not understand that he has a value as a stretch five?
I mean, sometimes
do you think he understands that he has value as a stretch five?
On some level.
Okay. Do you think that he understands him and Brunson could be good in pick and roll?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that he now has played a full season again under Thibs? Do you think that he's come away from this feeling, you know what? I don't know if there's much more Thibs could have done with me that would have helped me and my team out. I don't think that would be his takeaway. Now, I don't care what he says in public, and I'd much prefer if guys don't criticize the head coach in public in any way, shape, or form. I think that you can handle all that stuff behind closed doors. And I think the Knicks in general have done a good job as an organization of keeping stuff like that behind closed doors.
I mean, the Bridges thing was so milquetoast, and that got a huge play because it's so out of the norm.
And then again, do you think Bridges comes away from the season feeling like, yeah, Thibs pretty much did everything he could with me, used me the best way he could as a player, and got the most out of whatever I'm capable of? Do you think that?
No, I don't think he would come away with that. I think the only guys who would come away with that impression are probably Brunson and Hart.
Yeah, and I think those guys are just built like they are different players. They are kind of like, Brunson we know has known Thibs his entire life. So,
And
he's
he's
known him.
also the most talented player who can do basically anything on the basketball floor, right? So,
Right. So, it's fine. I don't, but when forget kind of Brunson and Hart to some extent. If your two main acquisitions of the offseason, your two headline pieces, are guys that you can point to and be like, yeah, I probably don't think that they come away from the
and
season maximized.
another guy you signed to a $200 million contract, the other starter, probably isn't that thrilled, or probably
Well, we
would
know he
answer
was
that
definitely
question.
not. We definitely know he was not thrilled at various points this season. It seems like he's gotten over that to a large extent
No,
now.
but he still forces shots and forces drives and doesn't pass. And I do think it's probably because he's out of the offense for large stretches. He's been really good on aggregate. But even that I keep bringing up that last three. That I didn't love that. And he made it. It's an incredible shot. But OG's a bit of a black hole, and I don't think he would be maybe if he was more involved in a fluid sense. But I think to your larger point, I think he would answer the question the same way that Cat and Bridges would.
Yeah. So if that's the case, I think that's kind of damning on the coach. And, if you want to say, well, this is not the roster that's good for him and they need new pieces, fine. But these are the pieces he had, and he hasn't done a particularly strong job. And to be also clear, I still feel this way. I think anybody on this roster, aside from Jalen Brunson, should be on the table in the right scenarios for trade. So I don't necessarily come away from the season either also thinking like, well, you have to bring Bridges back at all costs. You have to bring Cat back at all costs. You have to bring Josh Hart back at all costs. You have to bring McBride at all costs. Like, no, any of these guys can be moved. Any of them can be traded.
Trade
And then,
Nadia. I'm becoming a Nets fan.
yeah, Dottie is probably the one other guy that you can't just move. But everybody else can be moved. Everybody else can. There should be no sacred cows. But that also applies to Tom Thibodeau. Like, if players can be moved, and this front office has clearly moved many players, so can the fucking coach. At a certain point, the coach can be moved too. And I think we've reached that point. Look, and I'll stand on it too, because I still believe it. I would have fired him after that Miami series in 2023. I would have fired him after the 2022 season, which was a disgrace. But I would have fired him after that 2023 Miami series because I think you fundamentally saw the limitations of what this man is capable of.
Who do you think was the more talented team in that series?
The Knicks.
Even with Quickly and Grimes being hurt.
Yes. The Knicks were a more talented team. They didn't try anything in that series. They didn't try anything. They didn't try this is the only coach I truly believe that would basically play 4 fucking seasons with Julius Randle. And aside from like very brief instances at the end of games, never use him at the 5 ever. Like,
has he played much at the 5 with Minnesota? I guess they have Nas, so that makes it different.
A little bit different. I mean, if you had Randall and Cat, like, I don't know, do you like one, that defense would be kind of hilarious. but like, yeah, you can get away with never using Randall at the 5 in a scenario like that, right? But basically, I think any other coach in the league would at least try minus the Randall at the 5. And I'm sure that fucking Chris Finch has tried Randall at the 5 this year. I mean, I'd be shocked. Because I've seen him run like all 5 wing lineups. And Thibs is so funny because he'll just randomly come out with stuff like in game 4 when he just randomly was like, what if I just play no bigs at all right now? I'm like, what? Just whipping this out? And it was without Brunson on the floor too, which made it even more hilarious. Like, this is the time you're doing this? So Julius Randle this year played 6% of his minutes at the 5. Apparently last year he played 10% of his minutes at the 5. So I'm not sure where Basketball Reference is pulling this stuff from because it's definitely not true.
I used PvP stats. He's played 129 minutes in the regular season, so not a lot. Without Gobert or Nasri, do they have another 5 or?
Not one that matters.
Yeah, so 129 minutes, I guess, is their proxy. He played. It looks like so. That's probably about 10% of his minutes, just eyeballing it.
Yeah, and last year he played. Let's just see. So without any of without Randall,
It's more like 5% of his minutes.
yeah. So last year without any of Hartenstein, Achua, Mitch, or Jericho Sims on the floor, Randall played. Let's see. Played 64 minutes. Allegedly. I can't believe that even happened. You know, but it's just what it is. Like, this is what Thibs is as a coach. There's really good things to it, but I think there's also a ceiling to it. And the ceiling is there. Look, they kept him after 22, 23. I would have fired him then. They made a lot of fucking moves to the roster since then. And I think fundamentally we're still having similar we're having the same conversations. So
yeah, and I mean it isn't I don't think Doug Collins was considered a bad coach. The Bulls had to move on, right? We know what happened with Mark Jackson, right? The Lakers had success before Phil Jackson got there. You know, sometimes it happens in homegrown, right? I mean, I got to tell you this: if a lot of Heat Twitter was saying fire Spoelstra, if that comes to fruition, that should make the decision automatic. Give that motherfucker a blank check, not least to spite Riley. But you often see that the skill set. I think if Detroit I mean, you see this with Cleveland, right? I think you will see it if Detroit continues to grow with Bickerstaff again. The guy who sets the foundation isn't always the guy who can get you to the next level. And that's not to diminish being the guy who can set a foundation. Sometimes the guy who gets you to the next level can't set the foundation, right? We had the 11 rings guy, and yet he wasn't coaching, but he failed to build a good foundation, right? So there might be things that Thibs might be better in that role than Phil Jackson, right?
yeah.
But you have to base it on where you are. So
just a final thing. Starting lineup for this series now, minus 6.1 net rating, 111.6 offensive rating for the starters. This was posted in our Discord by Max. No other lineup for the Knicks has played at least 20 minutes together in this series, and no lineup outside of the starters has played at least 7 minutes and lost their minutes. But hey, the bench is the problem. The depth sucks, and all those guys should fuck off and maybe commit seppuku, because God knows that they're the reasons that we're getting blitzed when the starters are on the floor together. Overall, good stuff. All right, Stacy, anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
I was just on Locked On tonight. If you want to watch that for more Knicks talk, and I'll just plug all the great work at the Strickland and Howie Roseman's draft class. So,
yes, great draft class for Mr. Roseman. I have nothing to plug. I'll echo Stacy's sentiments about checking all the work at the Strickland. The post games have been lively. The recaps have been great. Colin and Miranda had really good ones for both games 3 and 4. We will see how game 5 recap turns out. I'm happy I'm not rating it. But yeah, all right, look, that's our show for today. I hope everybody has a great evening. The Knicks play on Thursday night, so hopefully they can turn things back around in their favor and maybe for once play a normal game, but they never play normal games in the playoffs, so I know that won't happen. All right, everybody enjoy your week, and me and Prez will be recording on Saturday, so you'll get the pod that day. Peace.